All right, in this lesson, we're going to take some start code again. I'll share the link with you in the video description and the document I have. But anyway, the start code, basically, it's a small company with 3 employees. It's their little payroll app. You add the number of hours they worked for the week and their rate of pay. I'm just going to do $10 because it's easy. And basically, it's right, hours worked times your hourly rate will be your weekly pay. But if you work overtime, right, and you work over 40 hours in a week, gets time and a half. So what time and a half means basically is that instead of getting paid $10, you times that by 1.5, which is $15, right? So let's say this person worked 50 hours at $10. 40 hours would be at $10 an hour, and then the extra 10 hours above 40 would be at $15 an hour. Okay, and then let's do 30 hours at $15 an hour. We hit determine wages. Ta-da! Right, 40 times 10 is 400. Here we get the 40 times 10, which is 400. But then the overtime 10 hours gets times 15, which is 150. So 400 plus 550 is, or 400 plus 150 is 550. And then 30 times 15 is that. Okay, so straightforward program, just inputs, process, outputs. But we're going to get some more practice with functions. We're going to functionize this program to make it more organized and more efficient. And the main focus this time, though, is that we're doing more of a calculation. So our functions are going to return values. Okay, we didn't really do that before. And return values are pretty straightforward. So here's the idea. We click the button. We're going to get all the inputs. DM just stands for Darcy Maddox, and then Sophie Orenstein is SO, and then Carl Yoon is KY, so just short for their initials. Okay, so we get the element, get its value, the plus sign to convert it to a number, right? And that gets all the hours and pay rates. And then for each employee, we're doing similar stuff, right? Similar stuff. We first figure out overtime. I assume the overtime is 0. But if it's greater than 40, then I set the overtime to be their hours minus 40, and then just set their hours to 40. So I have their hours, which will be, right, if they had overtime, their hours would be 40, and then you times that by their pay rate, and then you add their overtime hours times 1.5 times the pay rate, right? And if their time was 40 or less, then the overtime would be 0, and this would just be nothing, and you just do this calculation. Okay, and then the .toFix just outputs it to 2 decimal places, and we output the result. All right, so the goal here is first of all, right, this repeated code. We want to repeat this. We don't want to repeat it. We want to reuse this code in a function. So let's start maybe by just copying. Okay, now, yeah, sure, I'll copy and, no, I don't want to copy and paste all of it. I want to do my planning here maybe. And let's create a function, and what should it be? It should be calc wage maybe, right? Calc employee wage or calc wage. Then the purpose of the function is to calculate the wage of an employee based on hours and hourly pay rate, right? What data does the function need? Okay, well, so when I think of this function, I'm thinking, well, what am I going to do for each employee? Well, I need to know the hours and the hourly rate, right, that they get paid. Let's call that the hourly pay rate. And what does the function return? Apparently that should be 2 words. The function should return the wage, right? It's a calc wage function, so it should return the wage or the /pay for the employee. Okay, so I pass in, hey, this is how many hours the employee worked, this is their pay rate, it's going to return the pay or the wage for the employee. So I'm actually going to start by doing this. I'm going to pretend that I have that function, that it exists. So I still want to get all the inputs, right? I still need the value of all the input elements. But now I'm just going to take this code and I'm going to get the DM wage, right? That's for Darcy Maddox. Darcy Maddox, here's the DM wage span, right? I want to put their final wage right here. And I don't have this doesn't exist. So what I'd like to do is call my function, calc wage, and I would pass in Darcy Maddox hours, and I would pass in Darcy Maddox's pay rate, right? Pass in how many hours did Darcy Maddox work, what's the pay rate for Darcy Maddox, and this should return, right? When I call this function, it should return their wage, which then is going to be the inner HTML will be assigned whatever this function returns. Okay, so that's kind of the goal here. And then I would copy and paste that for SO wage, Sophie Orenstein, right? And I would pass in SO's hours and SO's pay rate. And last but not least is Carl Yoon, KY. And that should be my 3 employees. Okay, so that's the button clicked function. That's its job. It's going to get the inputs and it's going to output the results. But it's going to ask somebody else to actually do the calculation. So let's do that now. I'm going to copy one of these because I don't want to have to rewrite this. Let's define our function, calc wage. It's going to take in hours and pay rate. And let's paste this now. And now I don't need this specific, like this is kind of a generic. I'm just going to say overtime be 0. And if, oops, deleted too much there. If hours, right, whatever, I don't know what employee it is, but whatever data gets passed into this parameter, let's test that parameter. And if that parameter is greater than 40, then my overtime will be whatever the hours are minus 40. And then I'll just set hours to be 40. Right? This is like my regular hours, which will be 40, and my overtime is the difference between that and 40. And then I can do this. I'm just going to say let the pay or the wage be hours times the pay rate plus whatever the overtime is times the pay rate. And then I'm not doing this inner HTML stuff. Right? That's the job of this function here. It's going to set the inner HTML to be whatever this function returns. So this function has now done the calculation. I've calculated the pay. Now I need to return the pay. And I can do the 2 fixed. I could do it here, or I guess I could technically do it here. But this is probably nicer. Round it off to 2 decimal places and then return. Okay, and this should be it. I should now be able to delete all of this code. Hooray. Look at how much neater and awesome this is. Right? It almost fits on one screen. I can zoom out. There, fits on one screen. Okay, we get the inputs, and then this function calls this function to do its job. Says, hey, here's the hours and pay rate for the employees. Do your calculation, return the result, and then we output the result here. Okay. Let's save this and make sure it works. I'll just do the same numbers. I can't remember what I did here. Yeah, I think that was it. And looks like it still works. Check my console. I should have had that open just to make sure there's no error messages. No, that's just that random. I think it's the live server error. I'm not sure. Anyway. Okay, that's it. So, like the whole idea of the parameter, or sorry, these are the arguments. Right? Oh, actually, that might be good. Sometimes I like to do this, right? I could call this calc wage function and just pass in numbers, right? 40 hours at $10 is going to be 400. Right? Calc wage again, 10 hours at $20 an hour is going to be $200. Right? So it's just we're passing in those values and it returns the result. Notice it returns it as a string. That's because the 2 fixed converts the number to a string with 2 decimal places. And we may not want to do that. Maybe if we have to use this result in a calculation somewhere, then we wouldn't want to do the to fixed. We'd want to keep all the digits and keep it as a number. But anyway, the idea here is that this DM hours is just the number, right? It's the whatever's inside of that input element. This pay rate is just whatever it was inside of the input element, and we pass that into the function, right? This was 40, this was 10 when I typed it in. This was 50, this was 10, this was 30, this was 50. We pass those numbers in, it does its calculation, returns the result. All right. Anyway, power of functions, organization, efficiency, pass data into the function. Functions can return things, just that keyword return, and then it returns whatever's to the right of that expression. And when you return, it goes back to where it was called from, and it replaces this function call with whatever was returned. So the iteration becomes whatever this function returns. Okay, hope that makes sense. There'll be some practice assignments and another assignment for you to get good at this. All right, take care and see you next video.